You are standing at a mountain lake in 1952, 10,000 feet up in the Sierra Nevada. The water is perfectly still, crystal clear, and utterly empty of fish. Not empty by accident, empty by design. For 10,000 years. Now, I want you to sit with this for a moment. Between 1950 and 1975, the United States dropped roughly 70 million fingerling trout into western mountain lakes from airplanes. 70 million fish into lakes that had never hosted a predator. I am Dr. Hendrik Bale. I have spent my career studying what that decision erased. My grandmother was a limnologist. She studied lakes. She taught me to ask, what was there first? By the end of this chapter, you will understand why those planes were flying, who sent them, and what nobody bothered to ask. But stay with me, because the part that haunts me, the part we did not see until it was too late, that comes next. In 1947, Utah began experimenting with dropping fish from low-flying aircraft. The fingerlings survived. 80, 90, sometimes 95% of them lived. That survival rate changed everything. Before planes, fish traveled by pack mule in metal milk cans, 1 lake per season, both hands. Now a single Piper Cub could stock 20 lakes in a week. The Federal Aid and Sport Fish Restoration Act of 1950 pumped federal money directly into state hatcheries. Rainbow trout, brook trout, lake trout, millions of them, bred in industrial tanks, destined for altitude. State fish and game agencies expanded hatchery capacity faster than ever before. California alone moved tens of millions of fish per year into its waters. The rationale was simple. Empty lakes or wasted lakes, unproductive, waiting to be useful. A fishless lake meant no tourism dollars, no license revenue, no recreational value. The post-war middle class had automobiles now, and they wanted to fish. Sportsmen's clubs, fishing chambers, state legislators, all of them pushed for faster stocking. There was no organized resistance, no environmental impact surveys, no baseline ecological counts of what lived there before the planes arrived. That absence, that silence, is where the story turns. These lakes were not empty at all. Before the fish arrived, they held ancient communities found nowhere else on Earth. Now, those fishless lakes I told you about, I need to show you what was actually living in them. You are standing at the edge of a high Sierra lake, 6,000 feet up. The water so clear, you see the bottom. No fish, not one. But the lake is not empty. Everywhere you look, under rocks, in the mud, moving through the water column, life is there. The mountain yellow-legged frog, Rana muscosa, was the abundance animal up here for 10,000 years. I mean dense. Tadpoles so thick you could net them by the hundreds from a single cove. My grandmother measured their populations in the 1970s, before the full crash. She said they looked like moving carpet. Here is what you need to understand about a tadpole in these cold lakes. It takes 3, sometimes 4 years, just to grow big enough to leave the water. 4 years in a system with 0 fish predators. 4 years where nothing ate you. The tadpole never learned to hide, never evolved the instinct. It had no need. Then the trout arrived, and everything changed in a single season. A brook trout or a rainbow, both stocked by the millions, sees that tadpole as pure nutrition. The tadpole does not flee, does not know how. The trout consumes the entire reproductive class in 1 feeding season. Within 5 years, a lake so thick with yellow-legged frogs you could hear their calls for a mile was silent. By 1990, 90% of their historic range was gone. 90%. But the frogs were not alone in that water. The fairy shrimp, Branchinecta raptor, a predator the size of your thumb, ruled the zooplankton in fishless lakes. It ate smaller shrimp. It was the top invertebrate hunter in that world. One trout eliminates an entire Branchinecta population in weeks. Too visible, too large, too nutritious. The water fleas, Daphnia, the same. Trout take the biggest ones first, the ones that graze the algae. Without those grazers, the algae blooms, the lake water turns, the whole system tips into a new state. The mayflies, the midges, the aquatic insects emerging as adults, they vanished too. Those insects were feeding a landscape. Birds, bats, spiders living on land depended on that nutrient pulse from water. We broke the exchange between water and the world around it. Lakes that had been stable for 12,000 years were restructured in less than a decade. I need you to sit with that timeline. Not centuries, years. And here is the part that stopped my work cold when I first read the research. The people who managed these stocking programs, some of them knew this was happening in real time. Their own scientists were sending warnings, but something else was driving the machine. So, here is where the story breaks, and why those frogs stayed dead for 50 years. In 1950, Congress passed the Dingell-Johnson Act, and it changed everything about how fisheries agencies would be paid. A tax on every fishing rod, every reel, every lure. That money went straight to state stocking programs. The more fish you stock, the more anglers come. The more anglers, the more licenses sold, the more federal matching money flows back. I want you to sit with that loop for a moment, because it is a trap. By the 1970s, biologists inside the Fish and Wildlife Service were writing reports nobody wanted to read. They had the data. Rana muscosa gone, fairy shrimp gone, the whole zooplankton community erased in a single season. Roland Knapp at the Sierra Nevada lab ran the numbers himself, lake by lake, and the pattern was unmistakable. Trout were the killer. No trout, the frogs came back. Trout present, they disappeared. But here is what I need you to understand. The agency scientists had a problem nobody talks about. Their boss was not a biologist. It was a fish commissioner, almost always a sportsman himself. California's Fish Commission was stocked, no pun intended, with anglers and fishing industry men, not ecologists. The science said stop stocking. The budget said stock harder. And the budget won every single time. The gateway towns around the Sierra Nevada depended on angler dollars. Motels, gas stations, guide services, restaurants, $100 million a year, maybe more, tied to the expectation of a full lake and ready fish. When a state biologist quietly suggested that maybe we should leave a few lakes wild, the Chamber of Commerce fought it tooth and nail. Even Yellowstone National Park was not safe from this logic. Lake trout arrived in Yellowstone Lake. Nobody is entirely sure how, and they ate the native cutthroat trout wholesale. Cutthroat were keystone prey. Grizzlies ate them. Eagles ate them. 42 species depended on that one fish. The trophic cascade unraveled across the whole ecosystem, and by the 1990s, the damage was catastrophic. By then, the science was bulletproof. Knapp, Vredenberg, papers in every major journal, data that nobody could honestly dispute. Yet the stocking trucks kept rolling up the mountain roads. The Federal Aid Act had created a system that could not reform itself, because reform meant smaller budgets. Now, The question becomes, what did it take to finally reverse 70 years of momentum? And the answer is where we go next. So, here is what happened when the agencies actually stopped filling the lakes and started emptying them instead. In the 60 Lakes basin of Kings Canyon, they chose rotenone, a plant extract that stops gill-breathing organisms from using oxygen. Rotenone comes from tropical plant roots and breaks down in sunlight within weeks, leaving air-breathing mammals and birds completely unharmed. You apply it as a liquid directly to the water, and every trout in the lake dies within hours. Then you wait. And this is the part that rewrote my field notes. Within one season, the zooplankton came back. Daphnia, tiny shrimp species that trout had hunted to near zero for 60 years. The water cleared. Algae blooms that had ruled those lakes for decades collapsed. And then, within 2 to 5 years, the frogs returned. Mountain yellow-legged frogs, Rana muscosa, the species my grandmother counted by the thousands before 1950, began calling again in lakes everyone thought were permanently dead. Roland Kapp, the scientist who documented the trout frog collapse in the first place, watched populations recover from double digits to hundreds. Stoneflies, mayflies, caddisflies, salamanders. The entire insect architecture of these lakes rebuilt itself once the predator was gone. Here is the thing that breaks you open when you see it happen. You did not have to engineer any of this back. You simply removed the thing that was eating it. The lake remembered. Now, step back with me. 70 years of filling lakes from airplanes to make fishing better. Decades of ignoring scientists screaming into the void. A billion-dollar recreational machine that could not be stopped. And then, slowly, the system shifted. Federal agencies, state parks, the Forest Service all began coordinating removals. Complex, expensive, rotenone helicopter campaigns into designated wilderness. It cost hundreds of thousands per lake. Some anglers sued, some communities fought it. But the science was unshakable. The recovery was visible. My grandmother's lakes were coming back. And you know what the hardest part of this entire story is? We did it. We could have done this in 1975. We could have done it in 1985. We chose not to for 70 years because a nation wanted to catch fish on vacation more than it wanted to hear what was drowning underneath. That choice is the real shape of this story. And it is still the shape of every choice we make about land right now. If you have walked a restored mountain lake or fished one before and after this work, I want to hear what changed for you.